Ruth Vela. I am the Director for Global Technology Experience at Nextiva. I'm really excited to welcome you all to our first open tech talk. So at Nextiva, we do something called Devs and Bytes. And we have this new thing where if we see that a Devs and Bytes doesn't have confidential information, then we're like, why keep it private? Why not share it with the world? And so this is the first time that we're doing that. So we have a bunch of Nexties, as we call ourselves, employees from Nextiva joining from all around the world. But we also have a lot of people that sign up through our Eventbrite to be part of this tech talk. With no further ado, who wants to know how to create a front-end application with Webpack 5? So we have Nacho, our senior software engineer. He's based in our office in Mexico. He has been with Nextiva, I would say, for a bit more than 3 years. And the fantastic story is that he joined as a junior developer. And I still remember when we were, working together in Guadalajara, and he would just be the first one to come to the office and the last one to leave. I'm not saying that that's what you should do, but I'm just saying that, I guess that's how you develop yourself quickly and learn a ton. So with that, Nacho, I will hand it over to you to teach us how to create a front-end application using Webpack 5.
Thank you, Ruth. So this presentation that we are going to start doing, it is based for all the people that have started using Webpack or have an intermediate approach on how to do it. So with that in mind, I'm going to start presenting this. Hopefully everyone can see my screen, and let's get started. First of all, what we are going to cover is what is the anatomy of an application in the web context. And the next one is how JavaScript was added in the past for these applications and how it's added now that we have bundlers. Then we are going to create an application that is already in a GitHub repo that you can download. We are going to share that in a link in the chat. And also we are going to create a package with a simplified version of a function that we want to share across multiple SPAs. The SPA is the acronym of single page application. And at the end, we are going to integrate those two applications in order to have the complete scenario that we normally use in a web app these days. So the anatomy of the application, this is a real cool drawing that I love. Is basically the HTML that is going to be the base of your app with a specific elements. Let's assume that we have a button. That raw button without any style, just as the browser is going to render, it is known as part of the skeleton of the application. And you can have multiple just as tags, inputs, and as I already mentioned, buttons. The next part is the brain or the nervous system, as this image put it. This is going to be the logic in order to get all the data inputted into the corresponding buttons, inputs, forms, a reaction that the user is going through the application and doing some stuff either in the front-end layer or in the backend that is sending that information in order to react how it's going to happen, all the performance that we want to do. And in the last, we have CSS, that is the loudest of the parts of the design team. Basically is what gives the brand of your application. We normally have that part in the next UI components, but in this case is whatever the design team is going to add. So what was the problem in the past? Normally they created the JavaScript files, they minify it and then add it to the corresponding HTML and upload those independently, meaning that you can upload first the HTML and then you can upload the JSS. That could happen some issues with the dependencies in order to have the same one uploaded at the same time. And that is kind of tricky whenever that is happening. And that only the part of the development side is going to be tracked manually. Also, we have external packages that were exposed by CDN That is basically a link that will import the code into your page that needs to be tracked by ourselves. So that was a ton of work in order to get the application publicly for all the people. So what changed? I'm going to put Webpack in this example, but it's any bundle that you want to use is going to get all the files, all the different kind of archives like CSS, HTML, you have images, you have fonts, all the file that you can have a different extension, you can import it into your main bundle. And Webpack in this case is going to help us seeing how it's going to be the best approach in order to use it and having a more organized way to use the development environment. We have to be conscious that as developers, we want to pass the voice to other developers and not make the code so complicated that only us can do it. So with that in mind, this is the repo that hopefully it is already shared in the chat. And we can, I'm seeing that I only share my first part, but now we can see the repo. Okay, so we are going to start with a bare configuration that we don't have anything in order to start it. And what we want to achieve is having a dev server, a JavaScript file that is going to update it to the HTML, and that HTML available in a server. The dev server, it is going to be our computer in this case. For those that doesn't know what is a dev server, is a machine that you can access via a URL. And in this case, the local host and the port is going to be the entries for ourselves. So with that in mind, let's create the configuration of Webpack. I already have that in a specific command that is going to be 8253. So if we go in here and type 8253, we are going to have that configuration available. So first of all, we need to specify Webpack from where we want that JavaScript file to be injected to the corresponding HTML. In this case, by pattern of the developers, we're having that index.js in a folder that is called source, and that is what we are exporting in this part. There is a specific way to resolve the things that is with the pad library that is from Node. This is because we can invoke this in different parts, and we want to be sure that always resolves to the corresponding file that we want to specify. So this will mention to Webpack, start reading from this file in order to see if there are other files that we need to include in the final bundle. Next, we need to specify where those files are going to be landing. In this case, the clean part is going to say, when you make this final bundle, delete the previous one that you already have or do nothing. The file name is going to be the same one that we are already going to find in source index. And lastly, by convention, we are using a folder called this that is going to be where all the files are going to be landing. And lastly, for the HTML, we are going to have a plugin that is needed for Webpack. A plugin is basically something, it is going to get some computer stuff in order to help you doing some stuff, something like getting environment variables. You can also get a Webpack dev server but this is one specific case because it's already embedded in Webpack, thankfully. And in this case, it's going to create, based on the HTML that we already created, a package that is going to be injected as a source, just as we mentioned before. Instead of manually adding that ourselves, Webpack is going to add it automatically. With that, we are going to have a specific script called Webpack serve that is going to read all the configuration that is in webpack.config.js and start serving with that part. So if we can try to use npm start, that is that part of the script, we are going to face one particular error. And that is going to be in this part. So if no one is familiar with this syntax, it is JSX that is part of the React environment. And that is something that needs to be transpiled back to something that the browsers understand. Since browsers have a standard that doesn't accomplish with JSX according to can I use .com, then we need to do a specific thing. And that is the next part of it. Babel and React.js. In order to do this, we need to have a configuration that allows us to read JSX files. And that is going to be adding this particular part in the configuration that is known as a loader. A loader lets you specify which type of files you are going to use and what is going to be the corresponding library that is going to transpile back to the browser that understands it. In this case, Babel also needs another configuration that is linked with the same name at the root of the project. So if you can see, this is the configuration that is going to be used whenever you find a .js file in your project. And if you can see, we are specifying that it's going to be a preset of React. These presets is a little bit confusing because as you can see, whenever you start working with the front end, there are more and more capes that you need to, more layers that you need to understand in order to create a simple application that only renders a hello world. But basically, this is a conjunction of plugins. There are ways to discover that part of the JavaScript standard into the browser, because as we know, browser doesn't advance as fast as JavaScript, and we need to standardize a way to get all the content that is available into the corresponding one. With that in mind, we already have everything in order to start working with what we have. So I'm going to get to the next point. That is going to be A70, A7030. So, okay, let me change this. And it's A70, A73. Perfect. And having this particular one, I added the corresponding code in order to have a simple application that allows us to create a contact with a first name, last name, and a phone. You can have here the, I'm going to add myself, 333. Hopefully you're going to call me. And that is going to be the corresponding contact. With this, we already completed all the setup needed for a normal application that doesn't need a dev server environment variables, but we're going to cover those later on the project. At this part, I am seeing that the phone is going to have a specific format, and I want to see if we can integrate that part with a library. So just to wrapping up this single page application project, I'm going to notice that there's a lot of files that we need to do in order to have that part. So the first priority for a large application is to have small files so the developers can see what is inside of that content. And the bundler is going to be in charge in order to simplify that part in a single file or multiple. You want to use lazy loading. For those that already know that term, awesome. For those that doesn't, is basically loading that part of the application only if you land in that specific part. That is going to be handled by Webpack. Awesome. So getting to the next part, the package configuration. We already mentioned how the entry is going to work. Basically, we specify where it's going to land all the JavaScript that we want to read and where it's going to be outputted. As we mentioned, we wanted that every time we run a new build, we get rid of the old one. That is why we added this clean true. The file name, in this case, in CISA library, we specify it as index.js. We added a global disk that we can omit. This is just if you want to use Node and consume this part. And lastly, this is the main important part that is not well documented in Webpack, but you're going to need it if you want to use a third-party library or you are creating a new open source library. The type is going to be the way the modules are going to be bundled in JavaScript. There are different. Normally in Node.js, we use common JS syntax. That is the module that exports equals to something. And there are CommonJS 1 and 2. So be sure to check with Node what is going to be the one you are going to consume if you are only developing a Node application. If you are going to use a browser application like the one that we use, without getting any of the Webpack, you are going to use a global disk that basically is going to register that in the window object of your application in order to start consuming it. But if you want to be sure that any application that is used in your package has the ability to do it, you want to go with the type UMD. This is Universal Module Definition. If you use this, you can use this in the browser or in a Node application that this is the case we are using with Webpack. With that in mind, we only are missing the path, that is where that package is going to live. And if we see the contents that is, let me get this a little bit up. The content is minified and without any data that identifies the names of the variables. That is in order to have a compressed chunk that is going to be served in the browser. Now that we have that, we can include the package using an npm I, and since in this case we have both in the same folder, we can use a relative path just like this, using npm and the relative path that we have, and that will read the package name and it's going to be using in this part. So with that in mind, we can consume it in an SPA. So if you can see, we are in SPA source and context summary, and we already have that format function in order to be using. But that is going to give us always the same pattern that is going to be the default that we have. What if we want to specify that by environment, meaning that you want to deploy that to a specific region, and those are going to be a different pattern than the USA. So using that one, we could create that configuration using another plugin that is called .env. And if we go in here, let me just get to the recent. Oops. Excellent. So I'm going to get to the last part that is going to be far away of the integration, is environment variables and dev servers with proxies. I'm going to start with the first part, that is basically running that plugin. And just in a specific note, if you can see, all the plugins should be instantiable. That is why the HTML at the .env have a new word before them. And those are going to be available on the corresponding .env Webpack. That is, as you can see from the previous example, a library. Excellent. With that in mind, we can create an environment variable in our project called .env. I want to mention that it was not available because I have it listed in the git ignore, because those environment variables probably want to be for each developer and not for the rest of the world. And in here, we can search for the one that I already added called React app phone pattern, and specified another one. So if we go in here and get that part, we're going to have this new pattern. I just wanted to check with you guys that at the beginning we have parentheses, and if we inserted this one and start the application again, we are going to have only dashes. I know that probably this is like a dumb example, but I just wanted to see the powerful in here. You can add your own credentials for doing something. You can have the URL that you're going to hit if you're going to change from that, from RC or for the staging environment, and allowing a lot of stuff. So let's start this again, add in my name. And you can see those changes are reflected because we are importing this specific file that is going to be available for process.m, and that the name of the environment variable that you added. That is going to be it for the environment variables. And the last part is the one I love about Webpack, that is the Webpack dev server. This one is going to be something that is already available if you install that dependency, that is, in this case, Webpack dev server, this one. And what it allows you is, since you're already having a server that allows you to see the HTML, you can also register some other ports with different behavior. And in the one that you already have, that registration, proxy calls to a different domain. In this case, the example that I added was this proxy that is setting the Star Wars API that is available publicly to the corresponding SwappyDev env. So let's check that part. If I go to SwappyDev, I'm going to see that we're going to have, oops, one moment, please. If we go here, we can see that this is the page that we can hit. We need to go to swappy.dev in order to consume it. But since we are here, we can go to Star Wars slash, what was it? People one. And that is going to consume the external API and allowing us to use that. Imagine if you are using local environment to integrate with dev in order to have independencies with having to run two applications at the same time. I'm not sure what, oh, I think I need the pattern to be JSON. Just waiting for that part in order to be resolved. But this allows us to proxy to different environments that you need to test if it's available or not. And that facilitates a lot in order to avoid having a lot of dependencies in order to run your code. But another thing that happens using this is that probably you have the point where you are going to have some specific stuff that you want to mock, and mocking is a strategy in order to return dumb data, but it will let you help with the asynchronicity of JavaScript. So if you want to consume an endpoint that is going to return you back some data, you can have those mocks in here. We normally have those in a setup proxy file in order to have those lean and wait to see it with other developers. And you only have to specify the path you're going to use. If you are aware of the method you want to use, you can use get, post, put, and all of that. But if you want to use a more general approach, you can use app.use. And all the requests that are happening before getting to the corresponding server are going to happen in here. And you can use send for pure text or JSON as the normal JavaScript object notation. Awesome. And just to add like a quick cherry on the top, I love this open browser functionality that we have with the React Dev utils that basically, I don't know if you saw from previous support, but if we put the open true in the dev server configuration, it is always going to open another instance of your browser, another tab. And that kind of annoys me because probably you're going to get a lot of tabs at some point. So instead of that, we specify this open browser to the one that we want to standardize. And that will search in your browser if you already have a tab open. If that is the case, then you are going to go focus in that part and start working in that without any other tabs. Perfect. So with that, we cover all the points that you need in order to start a web application. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I just wanted to know if someone has any questions.
So we actually have a question. The question right now is, what other options are there besides Webpack, and why Webpack instead of the others?
Excellent. So there are a ton of ones. We choose Webpack because two things. One is that it already comes with model federations. That is a technique in order to share code that we are using. And the second one is create React app that is a CLI that allows you to create applications without any configuration. It's using Webpack under the hood. So if we migrate back to another one, we can see that it is going to be easy to already know that setup in order to use that part. But you can check for bundlers. There are going to be Vercel. I think there's another one that a friend called me Navarro that told me that it's very fast, but I don't remember the name, but yeah, there are a ton. I can't hear you.
Yeah, one that we're seeing here from Fabian Flores is Vue.js. It runs faster than El Rayo McQueen.
That's correct.
All right, any other questions from the audience? Was everything clear? Any comments? Let's see, let's give it a minute. Well, while we wait for that, Nacho, tell us, how did you get into Webpack?
So it was hard because I needed to create a library for us in order to complete a utility, but the documentation was not clear on how to do that part. So, oh, yeah, Arturo Navarro just put Bond, that is the other one that I was mentioning. But since there was not clarity on how Webpack works and the majority of our applications were based on that one, I just wanted to check how we need to get all the information in order to see what is going to be the explanation for usage. And then I started seeing all these extra features that allow to using Webpack Dev Server in order to unblock the front-end layer to start working on the content that we are going to receive. For example, the backend guys are defining how they are going to work internally, but they already agree that we are going to have that interface. Then we can go to the dev server, and whenever we hit a specific endpoint, we are going to get that interface back with the DTO and start working from our side. So that was pretty neat.
So we have another question. How do you know if your app would benefit from Webpack?
Okay. I think it's going to be a lot of aspects. So if you want to check what are going to be the benefits of using Webpack over the others, you can see if what features Webpack offers that the others doesn't, because if you want to only have a tool that allows you to run faster with builds and without using the extra stuff that Webpack is allowing you, that is not the one for you. You only wanted to use it when you have the dev server in order to unblock, as I mentioned. If you already have all the tooling in your company, for example, in this case, that we have CLI for create React application. And that's going to be like the two main points in order to decide.
The same thing. Any additional resources to learn more about React and Webpack? Like something that you will recommend?
Yeah, and actually I'm going to link to another part that Victor Hackett just asked, bundle sizes and optimization. I'm going to redirect to another one for you because I'm thinking you're talking about model federation, but if you're not using that tool, you can check the Sans Larkin YouTube video about optimization. And there's another one in Frontend Masters about how the plugins work and how can you use the tappable in order to create your own plugins and what is going to be under the hood of Webpack. Two things, Sans Larkin in YouTube and Sans Larkin in Frontend Masters.
Thank you. And there's another one from Moy that says, what about the scrambling, making source hard to read?
Can you, what do you refer regarding scrambling?
Moy, can you give us more details?
You mentioned like, I think, okay, I think I already know.
Actually, I forgot the word about how it's scrubbing, but like hiding the methods or variables or name.
Yeah, so that is one of the amazing things that Webpack already has configured, that basically if you put the mode to production, it's going to already have some optimization and some scrambling on how to obfuscate all the methods, delete all the spaces, remove comments in order to get a thin layer to be deployed. So in this case, if we can see in the mode of the package we already have in production, and we have the method name as format for number. The method name is going to be available because that is how we import it, but the numbers is going to be something that should not be available because that is a variable name. So that already do that obfuscation.
What other Webpack's plugins do you recommend for an SPA?
That is a tough one because that is one of the main points that I had in order to get discovering a Webpack. let's assume that, hey, I want to know what is already available. And in order to go and checking that part, we can go to the Webpack documentation, because they already have like, this is the one that we recommend in order to, for the normal use cases. They already have like, this is the one that we already approved, and what, for which situation you are going to use it. So you just want to check if that situation is going to be applying to yourself. It is the one you're going to be using. And if that doesn't happen, probably you're not going to use it. Another one that may help you in order to stabilize what is going to be the process you are going to use, the one that we have said for the environment available, is going to be the defined one. That also will let you know how the .env files are going to be added. But you probably want to check that based on the edge case that you are facing. Remember, the plugins are going to be solving things, adding code, I'm sorry, adding files to the corresponding configuration to the final bundle, and the loaders are going to be transpiling the files that you have.